Welcome to the Mob Museum. My name is Jeff Schumacher. I'm the Vice President of Exhibits and Programs here. Thank you for taking the time to come downtown for tonight's presentation, which is called Voices of Change, Escaping the Gang Culture. You know, the story of organized crime is multifaceted. Anybody who comes to our programs knows that. Most often during our programs in this room, we discuss the type of organized crime generally called the mob museum, the mob. You know, the guys in big cities who wore fedoras and hid Tommy guns under their coats. Or the guys who skimmed millions of dollars from Las Vegas casinos. We also have talked about international or transnational organized crime, you know, the Colombian, the Mexican drug cartels. Less often, however, do we drill down to the organized crime groups that are typically identified by streets and neighborhoods, the gangs that sadly play a huge role in the lives of our communities across the country. One of our main goals tonight is for our speakers to provide some insight into this subculture of street gangs, why they exist, the problems they create, and to perhaps offer some ideas on how we might tackle this situation a little better than we've been doing. Street gangs are not always classified as organized crime, but they should be. They are as much a part of the criminal underworld as the Five Families of New York or the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico. Okay, I'm excited and honored to introduce our speakers. This is such a treat to have these fellas with us tonight, and I want to tell you a little bit about them. So to my left is Louis Rodriguez. A biography of Louis Rodriguez could start a number of different ways. He's perhaps best known nationally as a poet and an author, but he is also a longtime political activist and a teacher. And before all that, as a youth, he was a gang member and a drug and alcohol addict. He is proudly 32 years sober and has dedicated most of his life to working with gang members and other troubled teens, not just teens, but others, helping them to turn their lives around by providing resources, connections, and tools to live purposeful and healthy lives. Louis is the author of 17 books, including the best-selling memoir, Always Running, and its sequel, It Calls You Back, an odyssey through love, addiction, revolutions, and healing. And this is what, you know, you always, it might be in his epitaph, I don't know. From 2014 to 2016, Louis was the official poet laureate of Los Angeles. For more than 40 years, he's been conducting writing workshops, poetry readings, talks, healing circles in prisons, juvenile facilities, and jails throughout the United States, as well as in Mexico, Central and South America, and Europe. He's the co-founder, and I want you to pronounce this for me, Tia Chucha's Central and South America, Tia Chucha's Central Cultural and Bookstore in Los Angeles' San Fernando Valley. And he's the founder of its Trauma to Transformation program that sends artists, poets, drummers, and theater people to prisons, juvenile facilities, and parolee housing. I can't help but include one more thing in Louis' introduction, and this is for me more than for you. It's a quote about Louis from the boss, Bruce Springsteen, who befriended Louis back in 2007. Bruce told Rolling Stone magazine, "I met a fella named Louis Rodriguez, a writer and a poet, who had a cultural center in Los Angeles. These are people I've known and worked with for a long time. These are the people trying to fill the holes that should long ago have been filled by government. Those are the people who give me optimism. They're relentlessly hopeful, and they face it all on the front lines on a daily basis," unquote. Please welcome Louis Rodriguez. Now, to my far left is Gabe Morales. Gabe Morales has worked in criminal justice for more than 30 years, most recently retiring as lieutenant at the Tacoma Immigration Processing Facility. Gabe was born in Yakima, Washington, and raised in Seattle, where he witnessed firsthand the activities of gangs, pimps, and drug dealers in the late 70s and early 80s. He served in the Marine Corps for 4 years, and then served as a corrections officer at Folsom State Prison in California for 6 years, as well as working with youth in greater Los Angeles area group homes. He then returned to his home state, Washington, and worked as a corrections officer at the King County Jail in Seattle for just over a year before being promoted to the classification section, and worked there for more than 20 years, interviewing and documenting criminal background information on thousands of inmates, helping them get into drug treatment and life skills classes. Gabe has given numerous presentations on gangs all over the United States, and he's written more than a dozen books, including a series of titles on gang history, prison gang history. He also has a popular podcast called Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians. Please welcome Gabe Morales. So as you can see, we have a high-powered couple of guys here, and we're going to talk about street gangs, we're going to talk about prison gangs, we're going to talk about ways of us as a culture getting around this, dealing with this problem. But I thought we would start, Louis, with you talking about, sort of summarizing your experiences with gang life as a young man. I know you were involved in some pretty heavy stuff back in the day.
So I was 11 years old when I joined the gang, which is a very undeveloped young person, but I also was a very, I say a lot of empties. I had a lot of, I wasn't a very solid kid, and the gangs pulled at me. And I think there's people in the gangs that kind of know when you're vulnerable. They know that you could be pulled deeper and deeper, and I was one of those people. At 12 years old, I started doing drugs, including heroin, but we didn't shoot it up till I was 15, but they give you heroin so you can put it on you can snort it, you can put it on your weed, you can skin pop it, there's things you could do. And then at 15, I started using intravenously. So I was on drugs, on heroin for 7 years. I was in and out of jails in juvenile hall. I was arrested for, they tried to get me for 3 murders when I was 16. They couldn't do that. And then at 17, I was arrested for attempted murder. We scared all the witnesses, so I got through that. I was also put on a lineup for a stabbing that I actually did, but the guy was so scared, he didn't point us out. I'm just letting you know what's in my books. And at 18, I was arrested for assaulting police officers, and I actually got convicted, but it turned out that the community stepped up on my behalf, showed up in court, telling him that, yeah, he was a troubled kid, but he's also changed his life. He's doing art, painting murals. He went back to school. So the judge gave me a big break, and I would say it wasn't a second chance. It was like a 4th or 5th chance. And he gave me time served in the county jail, and I got convicted, did that, and came out of it. But I came out of it completely changed. I promised myself that I would never go to jail for any criminal act, and I've kept that promise all these years. The only thing I would just add that I couldn't really let go working with gangs and working with people, so I started doing gang peace. I started working with gang kids, and I've been doing that for 55 years.
Wow. Yeah. I want to go back a little bit to when you were a teenager. That was a great summary. But there was this other side of you that, while you're involved in some of this criminal activity, at the other side, you're at the library.
So I was homeless for 3 years. My parents threw me out of the house, which I always tell people I never cried about it because I kind of think they did the right thing. My mom would say that I was a veneno en la casa. Estás venenando la familia. I was poison to the family, and I was poisoning my brothers and sisters, so I agreed, but being homeless is rough, but I made it work. But one of the things that helped me is my refuge was the Central Library downtown LA. I loved to read, and I shouldn't be a big reader because I tell people when I was 6 years old in Watts, when I went to school there, I got slapped across the face for speaking Spanish in front of my class. And I was very silent after that. I wouldn't speak out, wouldn't do nothing. But for some reason, when I was in the library, I really got taken by these books. And I have to give credit to this one librarian who would see this scruffy-looking Chicano kid reading books, and she would come and bring me books. Here's another book. And I would read Ray Bradbury, Raymond Chandler, Elmore Leonard, but also the Black Power books. They were very important. Malcolm X's autobiography, Eldridge Cleaver, George Jackson, all those books were meaningful for me, and all the poets, Nikki Giovanni and Don Ali and Leroy Jones that became a Mary Baraka. In other words, that helped me become the idea of maybe I could write books. So it was that seed was planted in that library.
If I remember it, and it was about that time when as a teenager, you won a literary contest, right?
So I was 18 years old, and I had just got out of jail, and they told me that I won an honorary mention in a Quinto Sol Chicano literary contest in Berkeley. And what happened is they gave me $250, which is a lot of money in those days, 1973. I was like thousands of dollars to me. Anyway, I got on the plane for the first time, and I've been shot at half a dozen times. I've been razor blades to my neck. I've been in fights. I was never scared in my life as when I was in that plane. That was the first time I was in a plane. It was the scariest thing. But I got to Berkeley, and I got this award. But I will tell you one thing really quickly. I was still on heroin. I eventually let it go. By 19, I was done. But I was going to go score. And you can score anywhere. So I was going to get out of this hotel. They put me in a hotel. I was going to sneak out, score down the street. And then in the lobby was all these people. And then it was the organizer said, hey, come with us. We're going to take you to a poetry reading. I'd never heard of poetry. I didn't want to go, but I said, well, I'm going to go with them. I'm sitting in the back, and I'll sneak out. So I go to this poetry the first time. And it was Jose Montoya. You may not know. He was like the leading Chicano poet at the time. It was David Henderson, the leading black poet of the time, and Pedro Piazza, the leading Puerto Rican poet. All three of them reading. I never left for that score. I was so enthralled by them. The way that they spoke, the language, the way that they moved their hands, the way I got taken by the poetry. And so I had to tell that story. That contest helped me, because by a year later, I was done with heroin, and I'm now getting ready to start another life.
Very good. So, Gabe, now let's tell your story a little bit about when you were young. You were not a gang member per se, but you had plenty of exposure to this life when you were a kid growing up in Seattle. Can you talk about that?
Correct. My grandfather did time for murder, 10 years, and I had uncles did time. My brother did time for most of his life, in and out of the system. So I was exposed to it. I had friends that were involved in gangs. My brother was a gang member. I was not. I was more of what they call an associate now. I was around it. I was around drugs, around violence. I was born in Yakima, Washington, which is a real small town in the central Washington, but it's predominantly Mexican Americans, and a lot of migrants that come from Texas and other states. And so that was my family background. We've been there over 100 years now in Yakima. My mother's white. My father's very dark Mexican, very much Yaqui blood. You can look at him and he looks like a Yaqui Indian. And so they had a lot of prejudice in Yakima. Maybe not as much as the Deep South, but they would get looks, and they could tell people were making comments or passing by, and so not treated well, discriminated against. And so they moved to Seattle in 1962. I don't remember it, but the World's Fair was in 1962. I don't remember seeing Elvis or anything like that, but I see the pictures, and my baby brother was born, my brother Joe, rest in peace. And so I grew up in a housing projects, public housing. It was predominantly black with a lot of poor whites. There was hardly any Mexicans in Seattle at the time, unlike Yakima. So we were getting it from both sides, from the white kids and the black kids. I learned how to fight real good or run real fast, I tell people. And so now today, there's quite a large Latino Mexican population in Seattle, but there wasn't back then. So I grew up hearing a lot of the stories about, where's my grandfather and why wasn't he around and why did he start a new family in Chicago, where Luis lived for a while. And I would hear stories about my uncle doing a robbery, and my dad was in the car, but my uncle took the hit for the whole thing and saved his cousin. I call him my uncle, but he's my dad's first cousin, my tío Nico, rest in peace. And so I would hear all these stories. I would see these things happening in the neighborhood. When I was 5 years old, I saw a guy get his head blown away, and I don't think any 5-year-old child should see something like it. It traumatized me for life, seeing some of these things. And I did not join a gang. I did deal drugs for a while, small-time hustle. I was not a big drug dealer, but I did. For a while, my brother was a pimp, a drug dealer, various crimes, shot a guy in the head when he was 14, went to the juvenile system in Washington State. So once again, I saw a lot of this stuff happening, very easily could have been involved in the system.
Why do you think you were able to avoid that?
I think because I saw so much pain, anguish from my family members, from my friends' mothers, seeing what happened to their children, mostly boys, the vast majority of boys, but seeing that happen to people and seeing a trend that, especially among Black and Latinos, that they almost thought it was a rite of passage to go to prison, to jail, to do time. It was like a badge of honor. And to be in a gang, to shoot somebody, to what may look like something bad to a lot of people, they looked at it as something good and something normal. And that's something that bothered me, that it was so normalized.
Yeah. Louis, why do you think kids are drawn to gangs? Why is it they're drawn to them, or do they really have a choice?
Well, I had to
Gabe
speak
had a
for
choice,
myself.
but-
Yeah, I think there's choices, but the problem is if you don't feel you have a choice, you don't have a choice. There are choices in real world, but when you're in very poor communities and when there's racism and discrimination, marginalization, all these things I think contribute to it, because almost all gangs in the United States are from marginalized communities. First ones were Irish or Italian or Jewish immigrants, and then later on, of course, Blacks from coming from the south to the north in urban tenement areas, and then, of course, all the Mexicans and Puerto Ricans coming into work wherever they could work. All the marginalized people got into gangs because it's a place where you can feel a sense of power, a sense of respect, sometimes family when you don't have a family. I got pulled in because my family was not that good, whatever is going on within me. I think the environment creates it. Poverty creates gangs, and that's where I feel that we have to do whatever we can to alleviate poverty, to alleviate the conditions for people wanting to be in gangs, and then to work with their own mental development as a health issue, so they themselves don't need to be in gangs, because sometimes you join a gang, you don't feel you have any value, and a gang gives you a sense of value.
Yeah, I've heard people say, it's kind of a replacement for your family, or it becomes more like your family than your real family.
I tell people that all human beings are born with a spirit. It's special for everyone. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's got that spirit. But you go through forms. Family is your first big form. If the family isn't that good, you have to get away from that family just to liberate your spirit. The gang could be the liberating thing, believe it or not, for a moment. But even that's a form that begins to strangle you. You have to know how to move through the form so you finally can get, now I can own my life. Now I'm liberated. I can be who I need to be. Sometimes it takes a while. Some people do it. Others don't. They get stuck in these different forms. So that's why I call it transformation, because you're moving through the forms that you have to get through to finally be that liberated person you were supposed to be when the day you were born.
Yeah. Gabe, you moved from, it took a very different turn. You went from this culture in which you had brothers and family members who were involved in, street crime, to going into the military and then into law enforcement, rather than, some other profession. Why did you go that route?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but the short version is my 21st birthday party was crashed by two Mexican mafia members and two 18th Street members. It's the biggest gang in LA, as Luis knows. They're also in Central America now. And so these four individuals crashed my 21st birthday party. It was all family and friends. It was something that I had hoped to be a proud moment. I didn't have to get the wino down the block to buy beer anymore. I could, buy it. I had my permit up on the wall. I was all proud. Hey, look at that. I was showing everybody, that's me right there. That's my name on the permit. And we rented this hall, which was about the size of this place here. And we had a bar. I provided the alcohol, and there's some people, smoking weed, that kind of thing. having a good time. We had a DJ, and these 4 guys crashed the party. I thought politely asked them to leave because they had been invited, and I knew they were trouble. I knew about them. I did not know them real well, but I knew who they were and that they had done time and that they were probably going to cause some trouble. And so they didn't want to leave. They started making a scene. My brother's friends, I told them no guns. I didn't want any problems. I wanted this to be a peaceful occasion, a happy occasion, and they didn't go anywhere without their guns, my brother's crew. And they were against it, but they abided by my wishes and wished me well for my 21st birthday. These guys then told me that they would leave, but they would be back with cuetes, with guns. And I knew right then that was not good because I knew they meant it. They were not bluffing. And so told everybody, hey, party over, we're gonna go to my brother's house, and they ended up shooting up the party, shooting my brother's best friend. He lost his leg. They tried to hack him up with a meat cleaver. It was just very ugly. My brother was in jail after that, but they came after me 2 more times. So that's 3 times they tried to kill me. And it came down to a decision, a very critical decision, a fork in the road. Either, and I actually had the homeboys from Yakima put a gun in front of me on the table and said, you know what you got to do, right? And I looked at that and I pushed it away and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. Which they, called me a coward and a punk, and how could you let them do that to your brother and to you and disrespect you, and all the peer pressure that comes with those kind of things that a lot of young men experience even today. I didn't want to be killed. I didn't want to kill somebody. I didn't like either one of those choices. I ended up joining the Marine Corps, which probably saved my life. But I think when I'm interviewing young people, I think about some of the bad choices when they're sitting in front of me in jail or prison, because I read their files. And I don't judge them because I know how easy it is to get caught up and be put in a bad situation where you feel there's no escape. But there is always another. It may not come right away, but there's always other options.
Louis, when you talk to young people who are in gangs or are in trouble, how do you try to say to them, there's an alternative, as Gabe says, there's another way?
Now, one thing that seems to really work, I mean, you can see a lot of things, a lot of people get it, some don't, but the one that really works is I told them that when I was in the gang, and a lot of them know this, I turned everything over to the gang. Everything. They didn't have anything for me. I didn't know I had anything. So the gang, you got it. You want me to shoot? You want me to steal? What do you want me to do? I did it, Heroin comes along, I turned everything to heroin. You turn everything over to these external things. They ain't you, but you got nothing for yourself. And I have to tell them, listen, that's what we end up doing. But then you don't own your life, as I say. You don't really own it. You got to get to the point where you own it. This is you. If you make mistakes, it's yours. If you do good, it's yours. But don't turn things over to other people and other things. And that seems to work to a lot of them because they know they've done that. Sometimes they don't know how to get out of it. Sometimes they don't know what to do. I just tell them, as like anything goes, try to be as creative as you can be, because to me, the path for liberation is to be a imaginative, creative human being, which is why I do arts and writing and dance and theater, everything that can get them involved with being expressive, because to me, creativity is the biggest key for liberation. And so that's how I end up talking to them, more than anything that speaks to them more than anything. You can't scare them like people talk about scared straight. If you got scared, you weren't meant to be there anyway. We were saying to the other group, it wasn't meant for you. But cared straight is what I call it. You care enough for them to say, listen, I care enough for you. I want you to think about what you need to do so you can be that person. I don't really want them to be something they're not. I don't want them to be just good citizens, because sometimes you're totally not who you're supposed to be. Be that liberated, free human being you were meant to be. I will have to add one thing. For me, what really pulled me through was the movimiento, the Chicano movement. That's why I became an activist. It was social justice, civil rights. These things pulled me. And I said, find something that can pull you through, because that's what pulled me. People get saved by a lot of things, and I don't think that I really got saved by anything other than the couple mentors and people that were trying to help me. What they ended up doing, not really saving me, but giving me the tools, resources, and connections I needed to save myself, and that's what I try to do.
Yeah, yeah. Gabe, your area of expertise, among others, is about prisons and prison gangs. And one of the, I think, more troubling aspects of our culture is that gangs are as prevalent in our prisons as they are in our neighborhoods. I mean, gangs are a central part of the whole prison experience today. Can you kind of summarize what this situation is and how it works in prison?
Sure, I'll try. It's a very complicated subject, but basically you have different levels of gang involvement. A lot of people tend to think that gangs are all the same. They're very much different in so many different ways. A lot of people ask me, Gabe, how do we solve the gang problem? I said, well, first of all, there's not a gang problem, there's gang problems, plural. And therefore, we need multiple solutions. So you have the associate kids, myself, for example. You have gang members, like this gentleman to my right, or my brother that got involved. You have gang members who are kind of on the edge, gang members are kind of in the middle, you have hardcore gang members. Then you have, when they get older, they end up getting arrested, eventually getting caught, and they go to jail and prison. Well, for instance, the Mexican Mafia runs California prisons. I mean, literally they run them. Yeah, the officers are there in charge, there's other people in charge, sergeants, lieutenants, etc. But the prison gangs run it. It's very racial in prison. I don't think a lot of people understand how you can be not even a gang member and go into prison. You have to pick a side. You have to either go with your race or you want to be a victim.
Who are like the 3 or 4? There's Mexican Mafia. Who are the other major?
Yeah, we call them the Big Four. They used to be the Big Five, Texas Syndicate, which is still in Texas. But in the California prison system, you have the Mexican Mafia, which is predominantly Sureños, Southern California, although not all. They're moving more and more into the northern part. You have the Nuestra Familia, which is predominantly from the north, although all the founders were from the south. So like I said, there's no exacts on a lot of this stuff. You have the Black Guerrilla family, which is virtually non-existent now. A lot of them came out of the Black Panthers and radical black movement. George Jackson being one of them was looked at as their founder by a lot of people, although there was others that are not as well known. And then you have the Aryan Brotherhood, which you hear that word, and the Aryan Brotherhood is very closely linked to the Mexican Mafia. I mean, they're like co-crimies. It's really, they should call them the Heroin Brotherhood, because that's really what it's about. They mostly deal in drugs, although they have other contraband they deal in, and they're mostly getting their drugs through the Mexican Mafia, who gets their drugs through the Mexican drug cartels. So there's a lot of connections and a lot of different ways. It's more horizontal a lot of times than vertical, like the Italian Mafia would be a godfather, capos, soldiers, etc. And so it's a different world, and unless you've been on the inside and seen it in jails and prisons, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's been this way in California since the late 1950s when the Mexican Mafia started, which was, by the way, a lot of people were surprised. They were all young kids. They were all 16, 17, 18 years old. They were young kids when they first started. They copied the Italian Mafia, the model. They liked that name because in the late 50s, the Italian Mafia, which this place has a lot of artifacts, was at its peak, really, going into its peak. And they wanted to be the biggest and baddest, not only on the block where they were all from, it was the gang of gangs. They wanted to be the elite, like the Green Berets, I've heard one guy say.
So if you're like a corrections officer, as you were in California, when these gangs are, as you say, basically running the prison, how do you navigate that as a prison guard?
Well, it's hard whether you're, again, if you're an offender, it's extremely hard. And also as a corrections officer, because you're supposed to be there to stop crimes. I was always a proactive officer. So I do believe that I stopped a lot of violence, a lot of even deaths, by being proactive. There was a lot of guards that were reactive. They just let them kill each other. God willing, someone would say. And that's too bad. You have those type of attitudes still working in the business. They don't belong there, in my opinion. I call myself a correctional peace officer. I was a prison cop, a jail cop, and I did that for quite a while. It was very frustrating, to be honest. And that's why I moved into classification, which is more like a correctional counselor. So then I started not just supervising and trying to stop violence, but actually try to change lives. And I really enjoyed that a lot more, and that's why I kind of went in that direction.
Louis, you traveled all over America, all over South America, Central America, talking about these issues, meeting so many different kinds of people. One of the things that one of these gangs that's in the news all the time, probably more than it deserves to be, is MS-13. We hear about them. I know you are familiar with that group, and can you kind of explain who that is and how they evolved?
Yeah, I'll try to be really quick with it because it's really complicated, but they were mainly Salvadorian kids that left as refugees during the civil wars. In the 80s was really the roughest time in El Salvador, and a lot of families came up, and they confronted these Chicano gangs that have been around since the 30s and 40s, sometimes even older. And these are hardcore gang kids. Now, these are kids from Civil War, but the Chicano kids had a lot of war behind them. So many of them joined the Chicano gangs. Almost all Chicano gangs have Central Americans in them.
We're talking about in LA.
In LA, this is all LA. This is not from El Salvador. This gang did not start in El Salvador. They didn't have gangs like that. And then some of them started their own little gang, Mata Salvatrucha. It wasn't little, but it was part of 18th Street, and eventually they broke off, became enemies. They started as stoners. They were just like AC/DC, long-haired, they weren't really. But once you join the juvenile facilities, you go to prison, you become a cholo, you become a Chicano gang member. They all took that style, the tattoos, the clothing, and so that's how they became Mata Salvatrucha. They made a name for themselves. They were able to hold their own. They did pretty well. But what happened, and pretty well as far as that goes, but what happened is they started to flex their muscle, and in the early 90s, they wanted to take on the Chicano gangs, and that was a big mistake. The Chicano gangs put a green light on them and really pushed them back. They had to, and I'm telling you all this stuff, they had to pay their way out, and now they're part of the 13 Sureño gang structure. They had to pay to get joined and not be attacked by Chicanos. Now they have their own battles, their own issues. But what really messed it up is in 92, the US government decides to, after the peace accords in El Salvador, decides to deport all these gang kids from LA to a country that never had gangs like this. That, I think, was a big mistake. That maybe there's things we could have done, whatever they could have done. They deported all these kids. They actually deported 1 million kids to Mexico and Central America during the 90s and 2000s. Most of them were gangs, but the majority were, and they impacted Mexico just like they impacted Central America. But El Salvador was a small country. It really impacted. Honduras as well, and Guatemala, which is larger, all got impacted by these LA gangs. And it changed the whole culture. I was there studying this stuff in 93. I went to El Salvador. I've been to El Salvador about 5 or 6 times. I went to 10 prisons, met with gang leaders. I even went to Guatemala, went to 2 prisons. I spent a month in Honduras working with abandoned kids, so I got to see what was going on. And at first, they saw me as a Chicano, he's one of us, but now they don't care about that stuff. Yeah, they've become more sophisticated. I just have to say that we made a transnational gang out of them. They were not a transnational gang. They're not the worst gang in the country. People got to put things in perspective. There's 1 million gang members, supposedly. The Mata Salvatrucha is less than 1%. And they're not the most murderers. You got Bloods, Crips, you got Sureños, Norteños, you got Aryan Brotherhood and a bunch of white skinhead gangs. You got all kinds of gangs. You get Cambodian gangs, Armenian gangs. You got a lot of them. They're not, but they're being targeted, I think, because mostly they represent what they consider the undocumented immigrant population, so they're over-targeting them, which I think is what we're looking at now. They're called the transnational terrorist gang, but they're not. We created them. If they're monsters, and I don't want to call them monsters, but if they are, they're monsters of our own making.
Let's. I want to just kind of talk about solutions. Like, what could we do differently in our culture to reduce the appeal of gang life? Maybe I'll start with you, Gabe. And we can talk about prisons too and what you can do there. But what could we do to make conditions less likely to join a gang?
Well, that's a question that a lot of people have. And once again, a lot of people are looking for the easy answer. They think it's a gang problem. We have one solution that should, cover it all. And it takes a multi-approach. We need to use prevention, but prevention only works for the kids probably that wouldn't have joined gangs anyways. They're not the at-risk kids. Probably the toughest group, and that's why I admire this man so much, the work he does is working with the gang-involved youth that are already involved and can't figure how to get out, how to change their mindset. When people join gangs, they don't join it because it's bad. Yes, us as society, we look at, hey, that's bad. Why would you do that? You're a bad boy. You're a bad person. They join gangs because it's good. It's doing something for them. It's meeting their needs. It's feeding them. It's housing them. It's clothing them. It's giving them, a little hustle. It's helping them self-medicate. They're giving them free drugs, free alcohol. And we had talked about it earlier today, but I think we have a huge mental health problem in America that isn't being addressed, and I don't think we'll solve the gang problem or a lot of our problems in society, even with non-gang people, until we solve that mental health problem, because that's really what it's about. It's about healthy thinking, healthy living, and not doing this very self-destructive lifestyle. That's the gang lifestyle or the drug lifestyle or the whatever abusive lifestyle. And so I think we need to really look very closely at our mental health system, our school system. A lot of these gang members, another question I'd ask besides are they suicidal when they first come in is how many years of school do they have? On average, the gang kids would tell me they had, or just inmates, period, was 9.5 years. So that means they dropped out before high school. So they call it the schools to prison pipeline, a lot of people do, the prison industrial complex. I think there's some good arguments about that. I think the crackdown on immigration right now is funding private prisons. A lot of the big funders of some of this move to crack down on immigration are also big stockholders in these private prisons. So it may make citizens think, hey, we're removing these criminals off the streets, but they're all getting out one day, most of them, or they're going somewhere else, and they're going to come back. A lot of them probably get released from prison more damaged than they were before, or go to other countries and cause more damage, like Mara Salvatrucha 18th Street is mentioned, to other countries, and not just El Salvador. They send them to Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico. The new one right now seems to be Tren de Aragua, which is a gang a prison gang that came out of Venezuela, and that's kind of the new political target right now, and people can make up their mind or not whether that's a political attack or target for political reasons, but they're not. Tren de Aragua is not the worst gang in America, nor is Mara Salvatrucha. There's a lot more gangs out there than those two, but they happen to be the kind of like the flavor of the month or flavor of the year, if you want to call it, right now.
Louis, so as you've mentioned, the avenue of escape for you is through the arts, and this works for a lot of kids because they can get involved in music or making movies or writing books or what have you. I would guess though that not every kid is drawn to the arts. So what are the other ways for for kids to kind of work their way out of this?
I think it's multiple. You have to have a multi-pronged approach. I think that's what Gabriel is talking about, having a multi-pronged approach. So there's wraparound programs. And one thing you should know, LA had 15,000 kids killed from gang violence from year 1980 to 2000. That's like a civil war, small civil war. We lowered, I say we because it wasn't just me, we lowered that violence starting in 2008 when we presented, I don't mind presenting it here real quickly, we presented this, we created 2 years, we spent 40 of us, black and brown community, effective community-based gang intervention. We have it's multi-pronged, all kinds of things that we wanted the city of LA to do. They actually adopted this. They didn't fully put it into effect, but the little bit they did changed everything. They started the GRID program, which is the Gang Reduction Youth Development Program. They went into key communities and started providing wraparound programming, mental health, drug treatment, anything to help alternative sentencing so the kids wouldn't be in this. The violence in LA has gone down tremendously. LA was the worse than Chicago, and I lived in Chicago in the 90s when it was the worst then for Chicago. It went down tremendously. People need to know that these things worked. By the way, Chicago violence also went down. When I was there, I helped pioneer restorative justice, gang intervention, urban peace projects. Some of those things didn't get brought into, but violence in Chicago has gone down. People talk about it's bad compared to LA, but it went down tremendously. And I will say one last thing. I took this to other places, including Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, where my family was from, when it was the murder capital of the world in 2010. And we lowered the violence, bringing these things, the arts and culture and other things. I took it to El Salvador. And we lowered the violence 70%, I'm gonna let you know, before this big imprisonment thing happened. Lowered it, kids, gang kids, MS-13, 18th Street kids brought in guns, they were doing peace, and they got undermined by the US government and conjunction with the Salvadorian government that undermine all of our efforts. Now the only answer for them is prison. So I will tell you, there is ways to go. We have proven it, it works, but we don't have the political will. And unfortunately, as was being brought up, now we're looking at immigrant young people, put them in detention centers, private prisons, which is all about money. And why they even send them to that prison in El Salvador, CICOT, because it's money. They're sending them to Ghana and other countries, giving them up to $10 million, our taxpayer dollars, to hold people that are not even from there. It's all money. So I really do believe there's answers. We have proven it. We just need the political will to make sure it happens to all our young people, for all our young people.
So that's true. Statistically, gang crime, murders are down, crime is down statistically, but obviously stuff's still happening. Bad things are happening in LA, Chicago, Las Vegas. There is a cycle here where stuff is continuing, right? And these programs could be extremely helpful.
Yeah.
But there's something else, right? I mean, there's something about poverty. I think there's something about.
You have to address
there's something about
issues. The root issues, like I always say,
root issues.
You got to become a root doctor, which has actually come from Africa, and a lot of African Americans use this root doctor. Go to the roots of things, and I think that the root issue literally is poverty. And most of the gangs were industrial, but now that we're in a post-industrial world, now we're seeing these internet gangs. So the issue for me is, can we erase the root of why people feel deprived? Poverty is the biggest problem. Because with poverty, not only do you have material poverty, but poverty of spirit. They're completely depressed or angry. They're losing them. We need to build both aspects. And one of the things is to make sure that we provide the treatment and the help and the caring that's required so that young people feel like they're actually loved and embraced, that families are supported when they need it, and that people can actually work and get jobs. One of the ways to help is, Homeboy Industries with Father Greg Boyle, is he says, nothing stops a bullet like a job. So he's got all these jobs that he gives young people. My son, who did close to 15 years in prison himself, was at Homeboy Industries for a while. They gave him a job. In other words, there's ways that we can help, but we need more of it. There's only one Homeboy Industries, one group in one city. There's not enough of us. I think we need to make sure that all our communities are saturated with a lot of love, a lot of caring, and a lot of programming and resources. then we're not going to see the kind of gang problems we're seeing today.
Definitely want to leave this our conversation on a positive note as best we can, and a couple of ways we can do that, I think, is, and I'll leave this open to each of you, like an example of, if you have one, and you don't have to name a person's name, but like an example of someone who you helped or played a role in them reforming their lives, coming back and from the darkness to the light. You have an example?
Oh, I have a lot of them, but I would like to start with an interesting case. You might not, Kenneth Hartman. Mm-hmm. You know about him. So here's a guy he's a white skinhead kid who at 19 murdered a black homeless man in Long Beach. They gave him life without possibility of parole. When I met him, it was kind of strange. I had a workshop in Lancaster Prison, which I did for 7 years, consistently every week I was there. And he shows up on my class. It's mostly black and brown, but he shows up. Everybody had respect for him. He wasn't the skinhead that everybody used to talk about. They used to call him Horace. Everybody hated him. He was very well respected because he decided to stop being a racist skinhead. He opened up the first honor yard in the state of California, right there, the programming yard that became Lancaster. And in the honor yard, they were supposed to be no racial division and no drugs and no gang affiliation. But it wasn't, you got to leave the gang. You just got to say, I'm not going to do gang stuff, and you go in there. It was the lowest crime rate and the lowest drug usage rate in all the yards of the state of California. I started doing this in 2012, I think it was. And he shows up. I didn't know who he was. Great writer, decent guy. We became good friends, and I found out who he was because this Chicano guy came up and said, you don't know who he is? That's Horace. That's Kenneth Hartman. He was one of the most hated white skinheads. But now everybody loves him. He changed his life, and he's helping people. So I helped him. Years later, he showed up in my class every time. He kept signing up. He got better and better. He wrote a book called Mother California because the state system raised him, the foster care system, juvenile system, and the prison system. Mother California. He ended up, I wrote a commutation letter, me and others, to get him out of prison. He finally got out of prison after 38 years. Wow. And now he's going around the country and also other parts of the world speaking about how to change people's lives. He's a really good friend of mine. We're in touch. 38 years he did in prison, but he's one of the sweetest, most decent guy you ever want to meet. I want to say this. People need to know. I know it's hard to imagine that here's a guy who murdered somebody, he's got a heavy-duty skinhead. And I'm talking about skinhead. Black and brown kids, I'm mostly the kids, young people in my classes. Here's this one white guy who really turned out to be a decent guy. I just want to mention him.
Oh, that's a great example. Mm-hmm. Gabe, anything come to mind?
Well, there's so many. I get emails, phone calls all the time from former offenders that thank me for what I did for them. And to be honest, a lot of times I don't even remember what I did, but they still remember me. It's, I think Maya Angelou said, people won't remember so much what you said is how you made them feel, but not only that, what you did even. They remember though how you made them feel, and I still get people, daily, all the time. I just had a MS-13 gang member who I believe admitted to 5 murders, probably good for twice as many, but he called me from prison and apologized for his actions. And I was like, why are you apologizing to me? Because he finally accepted his responsibility, and he wanted to let me know that I tried to help him and he wouldn't listen, but that he really did listen. Even though he's still incarcerated, he may be getting out one day. I always told him never lose hope. You got that life without parole, which I think is really usually a bad sentence to give because people change. He was a different person when he was a young man. He was pretty bad as they come. Killing a lot of people, hurting a lot of people. And MS-13 leader in LA came up to Seattle, started MS-13 up there, caused a lot of damage, got a lot of kids into that lifestyle, just really negative energy, and then now has a program in Monroe Prison right now as we speak that helps people turn their lives around. And a lot of them have gotten out and said, I went through Elmer Grumpy. They usually say Grumpy because that's the known by his gang. I mean Elmer because he doesn't like being called. That's just the old person. Grumpy is the old person he was. He's now Elmer, who is what he was born as, out of the womb. Elmer Cisneros, and he's helped a lot of people. Carlos Garza, Mexican Mafia associate, knew a lot of the guys that shot at me, that tried to kill me, and I brought him around to speak to young people, and he's spoken to law enforcement for me. Rest in peace, he died of cancer a while ago, but there's so many individuals. I mean, literally there's dozens and dozens of them, and they tell me that I helped them, and I always tell them, you helped me too, because you gave me faith that what I'm doing does make a difference. Because sometimes you really, maybe you felt this way sometimes too. Am I really making a difference? Am I just spinning my wheels here? But you may not reach them all, but if you just reach one, that makes a difference.
We'll wrap up before we take some questions, because I hope you have some questions you thought up. Louis is a world-renowned poet, literally, and we have the opportunity for him to read a poem for us. So would you do that for us, Louis?
Yeah, so I'm going to read this poem that a lot of guys in prison like. But I'll tell you a really quick story. I've been to a lot of prisons. I've been, like I said, in El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico. I've been to 5 prisons in Argentina. I was in 2 prisons in England, and I worked with juvenile offenders in Italy. And I love this work, and they write me because of my reputation doing this work. But the worst prison, I hate to say this, was in Chihuahua, where my family's from. It was a Cerezo prison, which is very hardcore prison. It was a drug cartel prison. A year before, 25 members of one cartel got killed from another cartel. 25. In Mexico, when they kill people, they don't just kill 1 or 2, whole mess of them get killed. So I was dealing with the cartel that got hit hard. And they invited me in there, and they didn't want me to come in there, but the warden, the Mexican government, and even the U.S. government, there was the State Department at the time, and said, we want him to come. And the warden says, I don't want him to come in there, but I told him I work with the Mara Salvatrucha and all these gangs. You work with the Maras and El Salvador? I said, oh yeah, okay, you can come in. So I got to come in there, and let me see if I can find the poem. I think I got it in my head, so I'll just. Anyway, what happened though is I'm in there was like 400 guys in a small room, maybe half the size of this room, 400 of them all piled in there. I'm talking and reading, and all of a sudden the warden pops in there with 2 of his bodyguards, and I didn't know that he had never set foot inside the prison. Because in that prison, the guards just protect the periphery. They don't go inside. The cartels run everything inside. And they even have weapons and all kinds of things, So he walks in for the first time, and all of a sudden 400 guys stand up and start yelling and screaming at him. And I won't say in Spanish, but they said, we don't got no food here, we don't got nothing to do, we don't got workshops. They were just complaining about everything. 40 guys in one cell, whatever it was they were going through. I knew what was going to happen. They were going to kidnap us. I just knew it. You feel it in your heart, oh no, they're going to kidnap us. Because that's what they do in these places. They're not lightweight places, they're very hardcore. And I didn't know what to do. I had no weapons, had no arms, had nothing to do. All I had was poetry. So in the middle of everything, I started walking back and forth, reciting poems in Spanish, whatever poem I had in Spanish. Anyway, I started reciting the poem, and then, pedazo, pedazo te desgarran, pelándote capas de tu ser, mintiendo sobre quién eres, hablando por sus sueños. So I'm doing a poem, and I'm getting their attention, and finally the warden and the bodyguards leave while they're paying attention to me, and they look over, and he's gone. And all of a sudden, the tension went away, and they all sat down, and then we had a good time. And that's what happens in prison. One moment, he knows this. One moment, everything's cool. Next moment, people can die. Another moment, tensions are really hard, and next moment, everything's okay. You just never know. So I'm going to read you the poem that I actually read, which is called, and it's the one that I was to read right now, but it's in English, and it's called Piece by Piece. Okay, I found it. Piece by piece, they tear at you, peeling away layers of being, lying about who you are, speaking for your dreams. In the squalor of their eyes, you are an outlaw, dressing you in a jacket of lies, tailor-made and still you fit their perfect picture. Take it off, make your own mantle, question their interrogators, eyeball the death in their gaze, say you won't succumb when they rename you, say you won't accept their codes, their colors, their putrid morals. Here you have a way. Here you can sing victory. Here you are not a conquered race, perpetual victim, a sullen face in a thunderstorm. Hands and minds, they're carving out a sanctuary. Use these weapons against them. Use your given gifts. They are not stone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louis. So we have time for a few questions. I hope you have a few questions about the topic for tonight or anything else for that matter. If you could raise your hand, and then we'll come around with the microphone.
Talk about young men and boys, but are there women involved in gangs, young girls?
Yes, absolutely. And I do go into women's prisons, and I do juvenile women's prisons. I will have to say that there's one big difference in a women's prison. The women really quickly can get emotional and support each other. This doesn't happen in the men's prisons. They can get there, but it takes a while. Right away in the women's, they kind of have an emotional connection with each other. It doesn't mean they don't hurt each other. It doesn't mean they're not capable of doing a lot of terrible things, except that they just seem to be more able to connect that way quickly. I'm surprised that as soon as they're writing, there's tears and everybody's there holding the women. You know, it's like you don't see this in the men's prison, but they are there. Some of them are murderers. I go to what they call level 4 prisons, which is the highest maximum prison in California. And so they're there. I do the juvenile halls too. I tell you a really quick story. There was I went to San Jose Juvenile Hall, and that's mostly Norteño, which was against Sureño. Now, my gang is a Sureño gang. I don't claim any of this stuff, but they, from my neighborhood, your Lomas 13, that's Sureño. Anyway, she refused to go out because she was the leader of the Norteño gang in this juvenile facility. So she stayed in her cell. So I did my talk. It was okay. You know, guys were cool. There was guys and girls. But I asked the staff if I could go in and talk to her. Of course, with staff there, I wanted to talk to her. And they said, well, we'll ask her. She said yes. So I went in there with the staff, and sure enough, the young lady came up to me, and she had my book always running. I really love this book. But I couldn't be out there because I had to put up this front. I'm the Norteña gang leader, you know what I'm saying? But I'm really glad you asked to come see me because I really wanted to meet you. It was funny, but that's the way it was, yeah.
First of all, I want to appreciate the fact that you came out here and talked to us. I got the invite last minute, but I'm glad that I came in. I work at an elementary school, and I really want to know what resources do you have for elementary schools for teachers to use and work with their kids?
Yeah, I actually have a book I wrote for children, thinking of joining gangs. And it was written for 8 to 12 years old, and the reason why, because a lot of the communities this book is used in, young kids have stepping over dead bodies. You know what I'm saying? And it actually is the only children's book that I know where somebody is actually shot. And this is a hard thing to have in a book like this, but it then speaks to the reality they're in. Now, she doesn't get killed, she's in a wheelchair, but the idea being that I wanted young people to know that the pull of the gang is strong. They feel it's the only respect they got the value, but they don't always know what they're entering. And this book is trying to show them that this is not necessarily the world they think it is. This young man finds out his own cousin gets shot. The bullet was meant for him because he was getting jumped to a little gang, but he got hurt. So I just wanted to tell that story. I don't really think punishment is a very helpful thing. I do think consequences are real. Consequences happen. But one of the biggest consequences is healing. How do we heal from our troubles, from our mental illness, from our drug use? Healing should be one of the biggest consequences that we do if we're going to put people away. Just make sure that they can get a lot of healing through it.
Do we have any more? Here's one right here. That'll be our last one.
Hello. Thank you so much for coming in here and speaking about a very serious problematic in our society. I am from El Salvador, actually. I moved here in 2014, and I was born in 1992. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to add a little bit more context to what you said about, how our country was hit with all the deportations and everything. All of that happened to a country that just went through the Civil War, a country that was destroyed, a country that was just barely coming out of their caves, where people barely had any infrastructure in the country, when people were still grieving all the dead people, the deaths. And then you come and just send all of that to our country. You really hit it very bad. It's a little like, because I used to live in Mexicanos. I don't know if you have heard about it.
I've been there.
It's a very dangerous place. I was very privileged to live with my family. My family was very protective of me. I was in a private school. It was very different, my reality, even though that I was living in that city. And just seeing the damage that it caused, what do you think, and seeing also, what the president now have done, what do you think it will be, based on your experience, the impact on these kids that have seen their parents taken away? So a lot of people in Secot, they are innocent, and there is a lot of people that are not. But how do you think, or what do you think it will be brewing in the country with this, impact?
Well, I think especially like El Salvador, we have to take responsibility as a country for the Civil War. We participated as a country on the side of the people that were actually killing most of the people. And then when the Civil War, all these refugees came, we treated the refugees badly. They were treated like second-class citizens. They'd come up to LA and Houston and other cities. And then, like you're saying, and during the peace, we deport all these kids that were trained by Mexican mafia people, by Chicanos, by others, how to be these gang kids, and brought that world down there. When I was there, I was very taken by, they were all Chicanos to me, and they talked to me like Chicano, orale ese, we were talking the calo, the caliche that we did, But what I could see is like, wait a minute, they're setting this country up. They're hurting these people. These kids didn't have anything. There was so much poverty. I was there when San Salvador didn't even have semáforos. They didn't have lamp, and now it's gotten bigger and nicer, but it didn't have nothing. There was slums. Remember the slums from the airport all the way to the city? I was there going through that. There was teachers living in slums. They weren't paying teachers. I had a good friend who was a teacher there, and he lived in the slum because they didn't pay him anything, So I do think we have to take responsibility. And what's really sad, them going against MS-13 is another irresponsible thing. It's monsters of our making. Whatever they've done, we helped create that. I don't think that Bukele and what he's doing, putting all these prisons and putting them away, is the answer. And yes, crime has gone down. I know I've got friends that say, hey, there's no more extortion. I get it. We did it in LA with the gang injunctions. We stopped extortions, all kinds of stuff. But it put more people in prisons, and then they come out worse than when they came in. So my thing is, like, I think what you're trying to say, we have a responsibility to care. We have to provide the resources and whatever is needed to keep El Salvador strong and healthy. And I just want to add, the Salvadorian people, just like the Guatemalan people, the Honduran people, are some of the most resilient, beautiful people you ever want to meet. Beautiful. So I really...
Thank you. Certainly some heavy stuff tonight. I appreciate everybody hanging in with us. And most importantly, we have books for sale by these two great authors. I encourage you to take a chance on the books, and they will sign them for you and inscribe them if you would like to do that. So thank you all very much for coming tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.